I want to do a quick video on how to repair the Harbor Freight 750 watt power inverter. This is the Harbor Freight 750 watt power inverter. I happened to notice that it is identical to the Black & Decker power inverter. I noticed there's like, the color is different. There are some other ones, it's probably the same damn thing. So what happened is, if you hook it up backwards, stupidly like I did, and don't have a fuse in there like you're supposed to, you will blow the fuses. There are 4 25 amp fuses all connected to each other. These are the new ones I put on. So basically, I forget what they're called, but they're, as far as I can, the next size down car fuse, basically. And they're 25 amp, and there's 4 of them connected in parallel to, I guess, make a 100 amp fuse. So what I did is I cut those off. I cut the old fuses off because they're soldered directly to the board. They're not supposed to be changeable. So what I did is I cut them off as high as possible, and I soldered these female terminals right on top of the old parts of the fuse. So if you see one of the old fuses, this part here is soldered directly to the board. Now it's a smaller fuse. I forget what they're called. So I decided to solder these terminals on, and then they can be removed without taking. You only have to take one end apart, which is pretty easy. You can pop them right out. This doesn't slide all the way out. That's the tricky part. The main thing is this. There's 4 of these. What do they call those? Heat exchangers to cool down the components here. Transistors. You have to take those out. There's 4 screws on the bottom and then 1 screw connecting to each. I'm hoping my repair is successful. When I went to solder this one, I fried this a little bit because somebody distracted me, and I just got a little bit distracted. So you will have to take this plastic part off. I ended up pulling one of the wires off of the plug end on the 120 volt side, so I just resoldered that too. Did a pretty sketchy job, but it should be fine. The spring and button pop off. The on-off spring and button pop off out of this hole here. But altogether, it's a pretty quick, easy job if you're good at soldering. If you're bad at soldering like me, it's also pretty easy. I actually used a small blowtorch to do the soldering because I don't have a good soldering iron. Just wanted to make a note here. These fuses, oh, now they're back in there, are not meant to be replaced. They don't care whether or not you break the machine. They care whether or not your house burns down and they get sued. Do not just jump out. This is the bottom here. These are the 2 buses that those 4 fuses connect to. Do not just jump it out, and do not run a 100 amp fuse between the 2. For electrical reasons, they have chosen this size and this type of fuse so that your house doesn't burn down and they don't get sued. I don't know the electrical details about that and the engineering details, but I would not just screw around and jump it out or whatever. So just replace them the way that I did, or the way of your choosing, solder them right to the board or whatever. But do not just throw a 100 amp in there or run wires out to a separate fuse. That's one 100 amp fuse, because I think it was done deliberately. Okay, here I am, still fixing this damn thing. 2 hours later. I had some stuff to do in the middle of it. Alright, so when I was putting it back together, the on-off switch, I screwed it up. I broke it. I took it apart, and if this happens to you, well, don't let it happen to you. If you're having trouble, honestly, just leave this out. There's enough holes in here anyway where dust can get in. It needs them to stay cool, and you can just stick your finger in there to break it, or just do something to this little tab here is, I think, what did it. I don't know. I put it all together, it was perfect. I pressed the button on and off, and then when I tightened the screws, something came out of a line and busted that switch. So right now I just soldered. It looks really crappy on camera, I swear it's not that bad. I soldered some wires to that, tested it, and confirmed, yep. So there's 2 rows like that. The back 2 are the contacts. It's a very simple, just 2 pole switch. Those other 2 leads that are sticking straight up are just to hold the switch on. Soldered them some wires, tested it to make sure it was actually that it would work, and I found this crazy little switch in the attic of this house I'm renting. It's just garbage up there on one of these old desk lamps from the 90s. It's like a little thing you put on your lap while you're doing your homework, I guess. So that should work fine. I can put this cover back on. Yeah, and just so you know, it doesn't say it anywhere, red is positive, black is negative. That should be clear enough, but if this was white, then black would be negative. I mean, would be positive, so it gets a little convoluted. Either way, I just want to confirm that I do recommend buying this inverter. I've had a bunch of different inverters. This one is really good. You wouldn't think so for 40 bucks at Harbor Freight when they you can buy them for 80 for the same size or smaller. But no, this thing is awesome. Definitely don't jump out the switch because it's a fault. Well, I guess if you had a fault, you could just take this off and back on, but once you reset it, it resets the fault. The other thing that's great about this is it has a USB charger. It says it's half an amp, but it seems like 750 or 1,000 milliamps. I don't know. I've had really good success charging on this thing too, my cell phone. Okay, so now that I realize I've shot everything, vertical video syndrome, I'll show you the last step here correctly. You take these, so now if you ever blow a fuse, or 4 fuses, you take out these 4 screws, slide this on out, don't force it, and then you can take these 3 out just by hand or whatever, and then you can take needle nose and get the last one out once those have been removed, because one is in the other orientation. Yeah, there it is. Alright, so that project took forever because I broke the switch. Would have been done a long time ago. Otherwise, I just ran my angle grinder to test it and it works fine, works great.